So King Charles has signed an order that completely removes Camilla from every single future coronation ceremony, rehearsal, and procession. And the reason it actually happened is way more complicated than just a family argument. Like, the official language makes it sound clean and constitutional, but when you actually look at what was said versus what happened behind closed doors, there's a whole private war in there that had been building for years. Before we get into it, make sure to hit subscribe on Palace Files so you don't miss these updates. Alright, so Charles is sitting in his private study at Windsor Castle with just his secretary and a constitutional advisor, and he's holding this document that essentially redraws the public shape of the monarchy. A coronation isn't just a party with fancy hats, it's the formal ritual that tells the entire nation who holds the crown, who stands beside that person, and how the next reign is supposed to begin. So when Charles decided Camilla would have no role in William and Catherine's future crowning, he wasn't canceling a single appearance. He was cutting her out of the symbolic center of royal continuity. He read the final paragraph twice, put his fountain pen down, kept his fingers against the desk for a few silent seconds, and then told his team to release it exactly as written. No softening, no diplomatic buffer. The command barred Camilla from every future coronation ceremony, anniversary observance, rehearsal, procession, council gathering, and formal event connected to the crowning of William and Catherine. It was total, and it carried his signature. When Camilla got the confirmation at Clarence's house, she initially thought she had just lost access to some planning meetings. Then her aide explained the full scope. She would not process, she would not rehearse, she would not sit within the official ceremonial structure at all. The Queen Consort gripped the arm of her chair and asked whether Charles had signed the order himself. The aide answered with one word: yes. She dismissed the room, but before the door closed, she demanded to know whether William had been consulted. And that question right there tells you where her mind immediately went. Suspicion replaced shock because the future king had been protecting Catherine's position from competing authority for a while. The signed order actually contained an additional clause transferring every female ceremonial duty to the Princess of Wales, meaning Catherine wouldn't just attend the next coronation. She would occupy the symbolic place Camilla believed still belonged to her. But the deepest wound wasn't even in the public declaration. A sealed internal review, basically a confidential palace investigation into restricted decisions, had documented a direct challenge to Charles's succession plan, and William had already read it. So while Camilla was searching for the person she thought had turned the monarch against her, Charles was preparing to confront the two people whose futures had made his decision unavoidable. Behind all the official language stood four people bound by marriage, succession, loyalty, and years of buried resentment. Camilla saw humiliation. William saw protection. Catherine saw a duty she had never demanded. And the king saw the private peace he had spent decades building start to collapse around the woman he still loved. Charles stayed in the Windsor study after the declaration was released. The crown, meaning the monarch's public authority and constitutional responsibility, demanded that he judge the threat to the next reign without letting marriage weaken his decision. But he wasn't sitting there as some distant sovereign. He was a husband who knew exactly how deeply the order would wound his wife. In a quiet conversation recorded in his private secretary's documented account, he admitted he had delayed signing because Camilla would experience it as betrayal, not protection. Camilla understood the loss immediately. She had endured years of public hostility before standing beside Charles at Westminster Abbey for his own coronation. Now she faced the possibility of becoming a spectator, while William and Catherine stepped into the future she had expected to help shape. William entered Windsor through a private side passage shortly after the announcement. He paused outside his father's study, straightened his jacket, and told an aide he would speak as the heir, not as an angry son. The prince believed the next coronation had to center on Catherine, the stability of his reign, and George's preparation as the young heir. Any competing authority could divide the ceremony and confuse the nation about where power truly rested. Catherine received the news from William without advisors or household staff present. She did not smile. She asked whether Camilla had been informed before her own name was placed in the order. When William said the decision belonged to Charles, she noticed how carefully he avoided discussing the sealed evidence. The princess pressed him gently. Was this punishment or was it protection? His silence told her the truth was darker than either word alone. Camilla confronted a long Irving aide at Clarence's house and demanded every name connected to the review. When William's office was mentioned, she removed the ceremonial brooch she had prepared for her next engagement and placed it on the table. Charles feared he had acted too late. She feared permanent displacement. William feared chaos in a succession, while Catherine feared being portrayed as the woman who benefited from another's fall. The question was no longer whether the order hurt them. It was whether the king had defended the monarchy or sacrificed his marriage to save it. And the answer to that goes back 6 weeks earlier, when one demand inside a private ceremony turned old tension into a point of no return. The crisis didn't begin with a signed order. It began during a closed ceremonial rehearsal inside St. George's Hall, where fewer than 12 people were permitted to remain. What should have been a technical discussion about William's eventual accession became a struggle over status, memory, and control. By the time Camilla left the room, Charles understood that silence would no longer preserve unity. Silence was now threatening it. The gathering had been arranged to test how the royal family would move through a future change of reign. An accession is the formal moment when a new monarch takes the throne, while a coronation is the later ceremony that publicly confirms that authority. Every entrance, signature, chair, and procession position mattered, because each one told the nation who represented the present, who belonged to the future, and where power would pass next. Charles stood beside the central table while officials reviewed positions for himself, Camilla, William, Catherine, and George. The mood tightened when a courtier moved one chair slightly behind the place reserved for the future king and his wife. The queen consort stopped him. Before he could step away, pulled the chair back into the central line and said she would not be placed behind the next generation as though the present reign had already ended. That's where it gets really specific. Camilla then made the demand that changed everything. She insisted on retaining a central processional position beside Charles during William and Catherine's coronation. She also requested authority to approve the ceremonial jewels and seating arrangements assigned to the Princess of Wales. Those details matter because jewels and placement aren't just decoration. They publicly define rank, legitimacy, and who holds influence inside the next royal household. Catherine lowered the notes in her hands, but said nothing. William asked whether the proposal carried constitutional approval, meaning formal acceptance from the advisors responsible for protecting the rules and stability of the monarchy. Camilla answered that custom could be interpreted by the reigning sovereign, which forced Charles to choose between supporting his wife and defending the boundaries of the next reign. Charles refused. The king told her that the future coronation belonged to the incoming monarch and consort, not to those whose reign was ending. She answered that she had endured years of public hostility to reach her present place and would not watch that position disappear without a fight. William's restraint finally broke. He stated that Catherine's role would not be negotiated. Camilla turned toward him and accused his office of planning her removal long before the rehearsal. Then she mentioned private ceremonial files she should never have known existed. Charles changed instantly. Those restricted plans had been available only to his office, William's advisors, and a small constitutional team. He ordered everyone out except his private secretary. When the doors closed, the monarch stared at the displaced chair and demanded a complete review of who had accessed the material. When that review came back, Charles didn't summon an advisor first. He summoned Camilla. There were no quarters to soften the language and no cameras to preserve appearances. Charles and Camilla met alone in a private Windsor drawing room, carrying years of loyalty into a conversation neither of them could escape. On the table between them lay the access report from the restricted coronation archive. The king didn't begin with an accusation. He began with a question, and her refusal to answer it changed everything. Charles waited beside the fireplace while the sealed review rested before Camilla's chair. A constitutional matter is an issue involving the rules, authority, and stability of the monarchy, and he warned that their conversation would remain personal unless she forced him to make it official. When she entered, he offered no familiar greeting. He asked her to sit, then quietly demanded to know how she had learned about ceremonial plans never shared with her household. Camilla did not answer directly. She said information affecting her future place should never have been hidden from her. The queen consort argued that exclusion had begun long before the rehearsal, and that she had merely refused to remain blind while others decided her fate. Charles slid the report across the table. The documented review showed that a member of her office had requested restricted seating charts, jewelry schedules, and procession plans under her verbal authority. Those files mattered because they shaped the next reign before the public ever saw it. Accessing them meant crossing from private concern into direct interference with succession planning. Camilla didn't deny the instruction. She insisted she had acted to protect herself from being erased by William's advisors. No sealed document, she said, should decide her place without allowing her to speak. The king answered that the argument was no longer about where she would stand. She had bypassed his authority and attempted to reshape a future coronation before he had approved its structure. Camilla rose. Anger sharpened her voice as she accused him of allowing guilt over Diana and fear of William to control the monarchy's future. Charles stood at once. His restraint broke. He told her never to use the memory of his former wife as a weapon against his son. Silence followed. Her anger collapsed into hurt as she asked whether decades of loyalty meant nothing. Whenever the heir objected, he replied that loyalty couldn't require the crown to ignore a breach of trust. Charles offered one final compromise. Camilla could keep her public duties and present standing, but she had to withdraw voluntarily from all future coronation planning and accept Catherine's uncontested ceremonial role. She refused. Withdrawal, she said, would look like confession. The king closed the report and told her that refusal left him only one choice. Camilla understood the warning. Yet she walked out without accepting his terms. The confrontation ended as a wound between husband and wife. But within hours, the machinery of the monarchy would turn that wound into an enforceable royal decision. Royal power rarely announces itself with raised voices. It moves through guarded consultations, private memoranda, and signatures placed beneath language chosen with surgical care. After Camilla rejected the final compromise, Charles turned to the small circle capable of transforming a marital judgment into a binding ceremonial command. The most important voice in that room belonged not to a lawyer or courtier, but to the son who would inherit the consequences. Charles entered the consultation carrying the strain of the confrontation with him. He held authority over his royal household and could decide who participated in ceremonies that were not fixed by law. A non-statutory ceremony is a royal event shaped by palace authority rather than an act of parliament. But because the order concerned a future coronation, his constitutional advisors warned that every sentence had to protect William's independence when the next reign began. A senior legal advisor urged the king to avoid removing Camilla's title of present duties. The order, he explained, should deal only with future coronation events so that no one could mistake ceremonial exclusion for a legal change in her current position. Charles listened while slowly turning his wedding ring around his finger when the advisor referred to her as the affected party. The monarch stopped him. "Her name is Camilla," he said. "Do not reduce this to a file." William entered without demanding revenge. The prince told his father that the next coronation couldn't begin as punishment for an old family wound. His concern was certainty. Catherine's authority had to be recognized. George needed to witness stability, and no hidden negotiation could be allowed to divide the next royal household before it even began. Charles asked whether Camilla could attend as a private family member without any ceremonial position. William answered carefully. He could accept her presence only if Catherine agreed, and only if there was no procession, robe, oath, official seat, or recognized role attached to it. The future king wasn't asking for humiliation. He was drawing a boundary that couldn't later be challenged. Catherine met Charles separately and refused to demand his wife's removal. She told him she would never ask a husband to disgrace the woman beside him. Yet the princess also admitted that she could not enter a future coronation knowing her place might still be questioned through private bargaining. Her words mattered because she wasn't fighting for status. She was protecting the clarity the ceremony had to represent. Catherine then offered to withdraw from early planning until the dispute was settled. That sacrifice became decisive. Charles understood that the woman gaining authority was willing to step back while Camilla had tried to reach beyond the limits of her role. The king dictated the final clause himself. All ceremonial authority would belong to the incoming sovereign and consort, and no representative of the previous reign could revise their positions. After midnight, Charles signed. William watched in silence as he placed down the pen. Protecting the monarchy, the king finally said, often means injuring the people closest to it. By morning, the order had left his desk, and its first consequences reached Camilla before anyone could prepare for her reaction. The consequences arrived, not as a dramatic public dismissal, but as a sequence of quiet removals. A briefing disappeared from Camilla's red box. A rehearsal invitation was withdrawn. Her name vanished from a ceremonial planning list she had reviewed only days earlier. Each change was administrative, almost bloodless. Yet together they delivered a devastating truth. The order was already being enforced, and no one around her possessed the authority to reverse it. Camilla opened her morning folder at Clarence House and found a single note where the coronation briefing should have been. A red box is the secure case used to carry official royal papers, and its contents normally reflect the duties and decisions awaiting a senior member of the family. This time, the note directed every future question to William's office. She read it twice, folded it once, and placed it beneath an untouched cup of tea. Her private secretary entered with more bad news. The ceremonial advisors attached to her household had been reassigned, and every wardrobe consultation connected to future coronation events had been cancelled. The Queen Consort asked whether Charles had personally approved each removal. The answer cut deeper than blame. The signed order activated the changes automatically. No second command was required. UN spread through her household almost immediately. Staff members who expected to coordinate with the future court began questioning whether their positions would survive. Some quietly requested transfers, afraid that loyalty to Camilla now looked like membership at a defeated faction. That matters because royal households depend on trust and continuity. Once experienced staff begin leaving, influence disappears long before any title does. Charles felt the distance at his next engagement. He noticed the empty place beside him after his wife canceled without explanation. The king completed the program, smiled when required, and spoke with steady control. Yet he asked his equi twice whether she had given a reason. An equi is a military or household aide who assists a senior royal with official duties, but even he could offer no answer. William received Camilla's private message before the event ended. She demanded a direct conversation and accused his office of using the order to strip away powers it had never mentioned. The prince told his staff not to reply until he had spoken with Catherine. Catherine urged him to answer personally. She warned that silence could make a settled constitutional decision feel like deliberate cruelty. The princess understood that victory without restraint could turn public sympathy toward the person who had lost. Camilla then explored a challenge through Charles's advisors. She asked whether a consort could be excluded from a coronation involving her own family. The legal answer was devastating. Attendance might be offered, but no ceremonial role was guaranteed. Later, she locked her annotated files inside a cabinet. Her hand paused over a note from Charles thanking her for supporting him during his own crowning. Then she closed the drawer. William decided to meet her alone. He rejected Catherine's offer to accompany him. This struggle, he said, had begun between heir and consort, and now had to continue without courtiers, advisors, or titles. That meeting wouldn't reverse the order, but it would finally expose the fear that had driven Camilla from the beginning. When William entered the room, there were no aides waiting with briefing papers and no careful palace language to hide behind. Camilla had requested a confrontation with the future king, but what followed was far more dangerous, an honest conversation between two people who had spent years judging each other through old wounds. For the first time, she admitted that the coronation dispute had never truly been about a chair, a robe, or a procession. William arrived alone at Clarence's house exactly as promised. The Prince of Wales is the title traditionally held by the direct heir to the throne, but Camilla refused to let rank control the opening moment. She remained standing until the door closed and asked whether he had come as the heir or as Charles's son. He answered that he had come as both because the family could no longer pretend those identities were separate. Camilla accused him of waiting years for the chance to reduce her position. William rejected the charge. He told her he had never tried to erase her from his father's reign, but he would not allow her to control the shape of his own. The distinction mattered because the next coronation would define where authority rested and whether Catherine entered the new reign with certainty or with another battle already waiting. The tension shifted when Camilla finally spoke without anger. She admitted that she feared becoming irrelevant the moment Charles's reign ended. The queen consort had endured public rejection, family hostility, and decades of comparison, only to discover that the institution might move forward without preserving any formal place for her. William softened, but he didn't retreat. He acknowledged what she had carried beside his father, then told her that suffering didn't create permanent authority. Coronation vows are the solemn promises made by a new monarch and consort during the crowning ceremony, and those vows had to belong entirely to the people accepting them. Camilla then asked whether Catherine had demanded her removal. William revealed through a documented account of the private conversation that the princess had done the opposite. She had offered to withdraw from early planning rather than deepen the conflict. The truth unsettled Camilla because it destroyed her belief that Catherine had been secretly working against her. Camilla lowered herself into a chair and pushed the unopened order toward him. William didn't take it. He sat opposite her and left the document between them. Then he offered one concession. She could attend the future coronation as Charles's wife and his family, but without a procession, oath, robe, or official ceremonial role. Camilla asked whether Catherine would agree. He said she already had. She didn't apologize for accessing the files, but she admitted that fear had driven her to demand control she didn't possess. William answered that acceptance, not victory, was the only path left. Camilla agreed not to challenge the order. He left without a handshake, but before the door closed, she thanked him for speaking directly. The private battle had reached its turning point. Outside the palace walls, however, one leaked phrase was about to turn that royal order into a national judgment. The palace had hoped the order could be explained through controlled language and constitutional restraint. Instead, one leaked phrase transformed it into the most explosive royal story of the year. Camilla removed from all coronation ceremonies within hours. Broadcasters interrupted regular programming. Newspaper editors rebuilt their front pages and crowds gathered outside royal gates. The private fear of becoming irrelevant had become a public spectacle, witnessed across the world. The next morning, a major London newspaper carried a stark photograph of Charles walking several steps ahead of Camilla beneath the headline "Crown Without Camilla." The subtitle declared that the king had personally approved her exclusion. A front page matters because it does more than report an event. It tells the public how that event should be understood. This one turned a private royal boundary into a national symbol of separation. A broadcaster opened its evening program outside Buckingham Palace and framed the order as proof that authority was moving toward William and Catherine. The palace is the sovereign's official London residence and the public center of the monarchy, which made the location itself part of the message. Supporters of Camilla held photographs from Charles's coronation, while others raised signs declaring that the next reign belonged to the prince and princess alone. Police barriers divided the groups as rival chants crossed the forecourt. Charles watched the coverage in silence at Windsor. When an advisor offered to turn off the television, the monarch refused. He said a king couldn't issue a public order and then hide from its consequences. The words sounded firm, but his expression carried the cost. The decision had protected the future crown while placing his marriage before a judging nation. Camilla found the same front page beside her breakfast. She didn't read the article. The queen consort studied the distance between herself and Charles in the photograph and asked her secretary whether the image had been chosen deliberately. Her aide said nothing, and that silence answered more than reassurance ever could. William reacted with anger when commentators suggested he had engineered the order to punish his stepmother. The prince authorized the statement, confirming that the decision belonged solely to the reigning sovereign, and that the future coronation would protect both family dignity and constitutional clarity. Catherine refused requests for a triumphant appearance when a woman at a charity engagement called out that she would make a magnificent queen. The princess thanked her and immediately returned attention to the cause. Camilla privately approved William's statement because it removed Catherine from blame and confirmed that Charles had acted independently. That quiet response recorded in a household account showed she intended to honor their private agreement. The palace then issued its final clarification. Camilla would keep her present title and duties, but no formal role in any future coronation ceremony. The removal was permanent. With public judgment raging beyond the gates, Charles gathered his family one final time to decide whether the order would destroy them or finally establish the boundaries they had avoided for years. The final meeting didn't restore what had been lost. Camilla wouldn't regain her ceremonial position. Charles wouldn't withdraw his signature, and William wouldn't surrender control over the future coronation. Yet the family entered the room no longer arguing over whether the decision could be reversed. They had come to decide what remained after it, and whether a monarchy built on continuity could survive without demanding that every wound be hidden. Charles gathered Camilla, William, and Catherine inside the same Windsor room, where the restricted review had first been discussed. The signed order rested on the table, but no advisors were present. A dispatch box is a locked case used to protect sensitive royal papers, and one waited beside the king as a silent reminder that this was no longer a legal consultation. It was a final family reckoning. The king began by accepting responsibility. He admitted that he had delayed setting firm ceremonial boundaries because he wanted to avoid hurting his wife. That delay allowed uncertainty to become suspicion, and suspicion to become a breach of trust. Charles didn't excuse what had happened. He simply acknowledged that his silence had helped create the crisis. Camilla answered without defiance. She confirmed that she wouldn't challenge the order or seek a formal role in William and Catherine's coronation. The queen consort admitted that fear of losing her place had pushed her across a line the sovereign couldn't ignore. She would remain beside her husband, but she would no longer attempt to shape the next reign. William promised that Camilla wouldn't be erased from Charles's years on the throne. Her public service, her support for the monarch, and her place within the family would be recognized honestly. Yet the prince made one boundary permanent. His future reign wouldn't be controlled by obligations created during the present one. Catherine then addressed Camilla directly. She said she had never sought her humiliation and didn't see the transfer of ceremonial authority as a victory. The princess would support William and protect the dignity of the crown, but she wouldn't inherit another woman's resentment. Charles reached toward his wife's hand, then stopped before touching it. He allowed her to decide. Camilla placed her hand over his. The gesture didn't erase the conflict, but it confirmed that their marriage would continue even though their royal roles had been separated. The family accepted the final arrangement. Camilla could attend the future coronation as Charles's wife and an honored family member, but she wouldn't process, swear an oath, wear carnation robes, approve ceremonial details, or hold an official place. Charles locked the signed order inside the dispatch box. The decision, he said, would never be reopened. This wasn't Camilla's destruction, Catherine's triumph, or William's revenge. It was the moment the king finally separated personal devotion from royal authority. There would be no reversal. Camilla kept her marriage but surrendered control. William protected his reign without demanding punishment. Catherine accepted power without celebrating another woman's fall. Charles preserved the monarchy by accepting that love could remain private even when power had to move forward. And honestly, when you step back and look at the whole thing, the most revealing part isn't the order itself. It's the fact that Catherine offered to step back from planning before anyone asked her to. While Camilla accessed files she wasn't supposed to know existed, that contrast tells you everything about why Charles ultimately signed. One woman was willing to sacrifice her position to protect the family's future clarity. The other tried to secure her position before the future even arrived. In the end, the king chose the person who wasn't fighting. And that might be the quietest and most permanent royal shift we've seen in decades.